Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pasch podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pasch.
Hi, this is Brian Pasch, and welcome to another podcast session. I'm so excited to have Atul Patel, the CEO and co-founder of Orbee, on today's podcast because there are some looming liabilities that dealers need to know about associated with the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. And we're just not talking about problems. We're talking about solutions. We're going to flip the script on liability and turn it into a first-party data advantage. So get ready for an amazing conversation. Atul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
So Atul, before we get into Orbee and a quick overview, you've had a long history outside of automotive where the skills that you're bringing to the automotive industry have been refined and successful. So let's take a moment to introduce dealers to your background and some of the successes you've had before you focused on automotive.
That sounds great. And thanks for having me, Brian. So I try to figure out if I should go to the back history and go forward or the most recent one. But I think I'll start with my earliest part of my career. I left a company called Countrywide Financial where I managed a lot of marketing analytics. And this was a big mortgage company. Movies are made out of it, good or bad, however you look at it.
I remember.
And I had left the company to start my first startup, which was called Lead ROI. And it was a lead management system. Back then, mortgage was so hot. We're talking multitudes on top of how the auto dealer is enjoying this time right now. Leads were coming in at massive scale, and mortgage brokers, credit unions, small banks had to figure out how to use technology to be able to be as fast as Countrywide and AmeriQuest and these other companies. And so we built a lead management software that would ingest a lead, route it to the right loan officer, predictively call the right lead at the right time, help pull soft credit, and reroute and automatically do this with systems that are akin to 2003 to 2006. So you could imagine what it looked like back then, but I still look at that as an area that I want to bring to automotive. But then I had a long history after selling that startup in various aspects of the marketing stack. So I ran a video syndication company. So we actually helped publishers build CTV and OTT inventory on Roku and Fire and online. Was involved in a DSP SSP platform that got acquired by Samsung Ads called AdGear. I was involved in Optimal Social. We were one of the first social ad buying platforms before Facebook had a lot of their own native tools. That was acquired by a company out in Boston called Brand Networks, which I'm still involved with. And they're doing some fantastic things around Twitter and TikTok and Snap. And finally, one of the things that is most relevant to what we're going to be talking about today, Brian, is I had co-invented a platform called Lead ID. And this was to create a universal ID number to leads that are being generated on the web, because the FTC and others have started to look at lead gen as a very sensitive area. And we created Lead ID, Ross and I, and we ended up having a company called Jernaya 10 years later be acquired by a company called Verisk, which is a large data analytics and risk assessment company. And that was my latest one. And I'm most excited about that because I've taken some of those core ideas and I've actually patented some new capabilities that are going to really fundamentally help the auto industry with this compliance nightmare that's sort of looming over us.
And I want to jump in because Atul, you and I have a couple of overlapping career paths, and I remember the Countrywide time and lead gen, and during Cash for Clunkers, I had the number one non-federal website. I had cashforclunkers.net, I think, and it was cashforclunkers.com. And when people typed in Cash for Clunkers, sometimes I was number one, sometimes I was right under the national site, generated thousands of leads. I remember prior to that, just talking to people in lead gen business, and what dealers should understand is lead brokers were kind of like the wild, wild west. So if you were a mortgage company and you wanted more business, a lead broker would say, hey, I got a list and I'm only going to sell these leads to 3 mortgage brokers. And you would believe them. And there is no way for a mortgage company to validate the broker's claim. And oftentimes, you know exactly what happened. They sold it to 10, 20, 30, 40 companies, or they sold it to one company. They used the list, and then that mortgage company sold it to 10 other of their friends. So what Lead ID did is help the buyers of consumer information in the form of mortgage leads to know how many people have touched that or how many people have been sold that lead. And that was a big breakthrough, right? A tool to kind of clean up the dirty industry of list selling.
It really was. It helped fundamentally change the industry and how people sort of could coexist and still innovate. So you're absolutely right. The leads could get resold by anyone. It could be a leak in the system. It could be one of your loan officers who has a side hustle reselling leads to his buddy down the street at another broker, or maybe he's doing it ahead of joining that other company. This was definitely wild, wild west. And not only was it simply about the reselling of leads, you had firms in other third world countries who would take white page data and fill out lead forms at scale. So imagine your name is in the old white pages. Hopefully everyone's opted out by that point for that, the thousands of books that are still printed. But you could actually take white page data and put first name, last name, phone number, first name, last name, phone number, and start generating leads. So you also had issues where the FTC was asking these brokers, did you have the right to call them? And they're like, what are you talking about? They filled out a lead form where? At LendingTree or Bills.com or, LoanWeb. Well, can you show me proof of that? Is there a fingerprint? And this is also what Lead ID helped with. So on one hand, we were able to use an audit trail to validate how many times leads were created, almost like a blockchain. But before then, this is 2011. So I can't sort of say this was blockchain per se, but it operated like it. And then we also created ways to prove to the FTC that the broker who was calling or the credit union, where, penalties could change your entire existence if you got hit with one, to prove that this is really what happened. And then to your point, Brian, it helped weed out the underworld. Now that underworld still exists in other markets. I just learned that funeral homes and funeral services are now going to be regulated. I think it's a new regulation that went out that the brand, Brian, that you end up getting your funeral services from has to be the brand that was at the lead form. Imagine that. You can no longer go to like funeral services for your family.com, fill out a lead form, and end up getting a call from your local memorial service. Just imagine that. Now the brand has to exist at the initial lead form. So imagine what that's going to do for that market. The auto industry is feeling this tectonic shift right now with GLB compliance.
And that's what I want to talk about, because we have to break it up in pieces. This is a very important conversation. So let me say that in my LinkedIn newsletter, I published an article, which will be the first of a few, but it was dated April 19th. And the title is, Will the Gramm-Leach Bliley Act Change the Auto Industry's Sloppy Data Handling Practices? And it's very important because the tool was very helpful to give me some information. We were brainstorming, and then I decided to write this because basically what we need to understand is the difference between a consumer and a customer, right? So a consumer has a lot of protections under this GLB Act. And when someone becomes a customer, they have a different set of protections, but surely less risk to the dealer when someone actually becomes a customer. And this is where there's an area of gray and where a tool's expertise in lead management and lead tracking come in. So let me set the stage for the dealers here, and then Atul, I want you to jump in. When a consumer comes to a dealer's website today and uses a digital retailing tool, the button that is maybe encouraging the consumer is not, you are going to buy a car right now. It may be explore payments or look at your deal or build your deal. Under no reliable defense could a dealer say, if a consumer clicks that button, they are my customer, right? They have no business relationship. There's no contracting. But in those tools, in those digital retailing tools, a consumer, maybe without their clear understanding, could have their soft pull credit done as they maybe tried to evaluate their trade-in data. They may be having their data pulled from other data sources. And then the bigger piece is that data that they put in is not just shared with the dealer who they're doing business with. Most digital retailing tools, if they have an unlock, that data is sent to the OEM, the data is sent to the digital retailing company, the data is sent to the dealer. If they do a soft pull credit, that consumer's data is sent to some credit bureau. That information could also be sent as some flag or lead to the OEM or data management company who's doing performance. And here's the key. Since the data for the consumer is being shared, and remember, they're not a customer yet, a full disclosure of who is getting their data has to be present on the website as far as I'm reading it. When they start a process, the dealers currently today are not advising the consumer that you should know that if you click this button and use these tools, your personal information can be shared with, I'm going to use an example, Stellantis, Shift Digital, the website company, and eShop. And this is a relatively big issue from what I can see. Atul, what's your perspective on this liability that digital retailing potentially exposes dealers to under GLB?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you make some very clear observations about the user experience. First of all, the disclosure is very critical. And that is, of course, going to be fundamentally changed in this process. You know, if you just think about all the forms you fill out as a consumer, in the auto industry, there's usually just one checkbox, terms and conditions. And you check it and you get the form filled out. And in there is this just massively loaded agreement. If anyone's ever watched a Netflix documentary called Terms and Conditions May Apply, it's a great one about what that agree button is loaded with. But then in a lot of industries, you have a second checkbox that says we may be sharing this with third parties. And that we're going to start seeing that show up. And it's going to be clear. It's going to have to be clear to the customer or the consumer. And that's going to be heavily focused on privacy. And it's going to be driven by state level, in my opinion. Okay. The second piece is that information does go out to all these other systems. And this new GLB safeguard rule of 2022, we'll call it, now requires that data to have been encrypted on its way to the third-party system. It has to be encrypted at rest in those systems. You have to get validation that it's being protected. And, God forbid, if there's a leak at any one of these companies, and Brian, you named sort of bigger organizations like the OEMs, but think about all the other widgets and tools that you might be using because there's some new innovation that a new startup has. And so now you're going to use this new form or this new chat program and integrate it all together. All of that data is now out there, and the dealer is on the hook for the protection of that data.
And that's the key, Atul, that I want every dealer to hear me and hear me clearly. The GLB Act puts the onus on the dealer for knowing where that data is being shared, and unfairly so. In many situations, the vendor partners don't disclose that. The OEMs don't disclose that. But someone, said, well, why should the dealers be on the hook? And all I'm saying is that as the way, and I'm not a legal expert, as the way it's written, the consumer comes to the local dealer's website, which is branded with them, and that website uses tools. Those tools collect data. You have a trade tool, a soft pull tool, a contracting tool. I can keep on going on. And the dealer needs to understand now, for the first time maybe, that they need to know all the places where it's going. And as you mentioned, Atul, that each of those vendors is certified that their data storage practices are compliant with GLB. But I'm thinking it's even bigger. I'm wondering, Atul, if dealers have to have some type of legal agreement which would require their vendor partners to certify, right? And that if their systems are not compliant, and a fine, and these fines are quite large per occurrence. These could be hundreds of thousands, or for a large group, millions of dollars fine. I wonder if the dealers need to talk to their legal counsel and draft almost like a hold harmless to get them to pay for these legal damages.
That's a good point. Look, my opinion is that is a necessary evil. You need to have that in place, but it's not going to protect you, right? So indemnification is kind of that sort of fine print you're talking about here. And imagine if you have the FTC looking underneath the hood for some other reason, right? You were talking about soft pulls. So let's say FCRA kind of plays in, Fair Credit Reporting Act, and they're in your office to check on FCRA, and then they look at these other items like TCPA compliance or GLB compliance and so forth. In all these circumstances, let's say you still had to pony up to the FTC the bill, and then you have to go chase startups for that money or other vendors that you're using. And so you're going through this long, tedious process, but you've already been fined. You already owe that money, and you've got a red flag now on you, regardless of what, indemnification you have in the contract. So yes, I do believe, just like with labor, you need to have those labor posters, Brian, in the cafeteria. That's like any business owner knows that you get that annual email from some labor poster sales company, and their conversion rates must be amazing, because I'm like, oh, yep, I need a new labor poster. You need that. You have to have that. And then you have to have harassment training for your executives. You have to do all of the things that set the foundation. But I think that's the start of it. I think what really will happen over the course of the next 5 years, not just in automotive, but broadly, is this sort of new layer of protection and this push towards keeping the data in-house. Because any time a phone number or email or first name, last name, or VIN number, any of that information is out there, you just don't know. Just like what we said, the mortgage loan officer who's taking a copy of all the leads and giving it to his friends, what's preventing that from happening today everywhere your data is leaked? Like, I don't want to be an alarmist, but at the end of the day, this is a fundamental risk of technology that happens out there. There have been, every week we hear some new leakage of data. There's a lot of push. And remember, in Europe, I was speaking to Rob Leatherin, who's now VP of Privacy and Security at Google, and he was one of my co-founders of those startups I described. He talked about EU's new Digital Markets Act, DMA, and Digital Services Act, DSA. This thing doesn't even allow YouTube to share data with Google search. So think about it. Even within Google's own umbrella, your data of what you watched on YouTube cannot affect what is happening in your search bar. And that's within one organization. In the automotive industry, we have so many widgets, so many tools. And Brian, you talk a lot about the user leaving the website and going into a subdomain that's managed by the OEM. And all of these things are happening, and this PII is just flying all over the place, and the dealership is on the hook. Now, I want to challenge I want to have a conversation specifically about what the consumer thinks. When you go to a dealership site and you start chatting, yeah, you see the powered by and the vendor's name, but the consumer is not actively thinking, I'm chatting with the tech company, right? They think they're chatting with the with the dealership.
Right.
Same thing with the trade-in tool or a credit report. The logo is gone. It's an iframe, and it's almost like a naked iframe, right? It's borderless. It blends into the background of the web page. The consumer has no idea that their form data, we're talking crazy sensitive information, just like the 5 pillars, right? First name, last name, phone number, et cetera, is going out to this second server. And even though that lead is posted back to the dealership CRM through ADF and whatnot, which, by the way, needs to be rethought with encryption, that copy is still at the other vendor.
That's right.
So even if you protect the one copy, it's like the movies that you watch, right? 007 kind of movies where the forfeit still exists. You got to control every copy.
Right. And that's where I want to propose why your experience with Lead ID could be very critical to helping move forward a feasible solution that can be implemented. And let me set the framework, and Atul, I'd like you to, obviously comment, because dealers, I need you to take a breath for a moment and rethink this idea. Because when Atul explained to me what he thought one of the path forwards could be, took me a minute to think, and I was like, wow, that would be really good. And let me explain. When you have a lead form on your website, and that lead form maybe is being used to provide a trade value, the trade tool company doesn't need the customer's name and email address. It's part of that because the way trade tools sell their tool to dealers is like, hey, you put this tool, yeah, the consumer gets a trade, but you get a lead. But the trade-in company doesn't need the customer's PII. So what if the world looked a little different, where the dealer, when he had contact us form or get your trade eval, what if there was a way that the form that pops up is actually controlled by the dealer? It is not a website form. It's not a trade-in form. It's the dealer's, you might want to call it consumer greeting form, where they fill out some information. And then that software, which the dealer owns and controls, creates a unique user ID and sends, say, via API to the trade tool, hey, customer ID 1282467 needs a trade-in price on a 1998 Ford Explorer with 100,000 miles. What that does is allow the consumer very seamlessly to get their trade value, but the dealer controls the PII. Same thing with a credit or finance app. Secure API to Experian or Equifax or whatever, that the website provider does not have a copy of that. That includes, and this is where the friction is, that the OEM would only know, hey, this website got so many trade leads and so many finance leads and so many, test drive leads, but not locking the dealer into sharing that information. And of course, dealer groups listening to this with the multi-million-dollar potential fines needs to say to yourself, hold on, Brian, that means when someone comes to my website, I control their PII, and my website still functions because I'm going to require my online marketing partners to support me via API versus iframes and tools that I can't control where that PII goes. Is that a high-level summary that captures your thoughts at all?
You nailed it. And for everyone listening, the best time to talk to Brian is when he's driving 5 hours in Europe.
Yes.
And that's when we spoke, and you nailed it. Yeah, when you wrote that post, I loved how you framed it, and you have a great way to communicate to dealers, and you nailed it. The form, and it's not just the data being collected, it's the data being used. If you go to a third-party vendor that needs to text people for you, what did you just give them in the Excel file? A list of phone numbers. That's PII. So literally, not just the collection of data, but now the using of that data has to change. So, we always talk about the logging of emails and how many ways the consumer gets reached out to by all the vendors you use. Well, imagine if all emails are only sent through the dealership group's email engine. So imagine the trade-in tool says, but I need to email them, and I have a perfect time to email them, and I have a perfect body of text that really drives the conversion and gets them back to sell you the car. The dealer can say, you know what? I'll send the email to you. So bring back that token, Brian, the one you described earlier. Bring back that token and give me the body of the email, and I will email it, including the PII dynamic replacement, hi, first name.
That's right.
Says hi, a tool. And now the dealer gets, there's actually 3 benefits. 1, the regulatory benefit. 2, the customer experience never has to tell your name multiple times. And 3, all of the logging of what's being collected and what's being used and what's being sent. And every time your consumer sees an email, 1 outbox. In email, 1 outbox for text, 1 outbox for on-site relationships. Everything happens centrally. And this is, again, yeah.
So a tool, let me just jump in a second for dealers who may miss, and there's a lot of subtleties, and that's why we're going to be talking about this topic at the Automotive CXO Summit in the Napa Valley on Saturday, May 21st, before DMSC. Dealers know the problems, what happens when they change email providers, they change CRM providers, they change texting or messaging companies. What they have all learned the hard way is that depending on whether they have a isolated server or a shared server for email, delivery rates can vary greatly. And when they have messaging platforms that switch or change, people could be trying to message a year later based on what they thought was the service advisor. And a lot of times those messaging addresses just blow up. What we're talking about, and I know it's hard for dealers to understand, is what if they really said, I need to control the people's information who come to my website, engage on my website, or chat with me, and I'm still going to get the customer experience right, but I now don't have to worry about who has my data because I'm the only one. I don't have to worry if I want to change my email marketing company because I'm the one who's sending them out. Maybe they design them better. I don't need to worry about switching from podium to another product, because at the end of the day, I'm using my messaging server. I think that's mind-blowing for dealers to understand that it's most likely going to have to move in that direction because of GLB.
Exactly. GLB is the driver that's going to create innovation in our industry where the currency is no longer leads. I mean, just imagine if you're an amazing new idea for innovation and you're not being judged by how many leads you make, but instead what the experience is like. And you can actually benefit collectively. When Brian puts his information in one form, imagine if the other technology says, "Hi Brian, how are you?" I mean, it sounds so basic. When I call American Express, it's just always on point. It's like, "Hi, hi Atul, hope you're having a good day. Are you calling about the payment that's scheduled for tomorrow that you just did on the website?" It's all connected. And so yeah, the user experience is going to be so profound with this new model that regulation is going to become an afterthought. And we're all going to say, we might even want to write a thank you letter to the FTC.
Well, listen, I don't think any dealer will send that thank you letter, but I will tell you that they should send us a thank you letter for bringing this to their forefront before it becomes a financial liability. So let's move to the next piece. Atul, if dealers now understand that they control no longer the website forms, no longer the DR forms, no longer that at the point of an unlock, the dealer controls that, and then they can send a software signal to the digital retailing tool, to the trade tool, what user ID is currently operating on the website, so that third-party tool could use that same user ID. That's not a big technical thing. The big thing is the platform for a dealership group. Let's start there at the group level because they have the most risk to really manage this. This is kind of like a marketing data warehouse. It is a communication platform to different software tools. And Orbee's been working on this kind of unified marketing platform, marketing intelligence for years. Do you see yourself now adding this to the tech stack to provide a viable solution for dealers looking to protect themselves from GLB?
Yeah, that is exactly the case. I feel like this, and I'll be frank, I've been looking for the right catalyst to help me deliver it. Because this well, Brian. Talking to me is not, you got to have a faint of heart because I love getting into the weeds of the technology and so forth. But finally, this outside force, this FTC GLB safeguards rule law, really gave me an inspiration. It kind of gave me a reason to be working with the automotive industry because look, there's a lot of industries I could have gone to. And you sort of think about that a lot. You're like, why does everyone else using Shopify and all these other things get it, and why can't we get it? And finally, I feel that the automotive industry, I want dealer groups especially, because you're right, they are going to be the first targets, but they're also the ones that should lead innovation, have the opportunity for once to let outside of automotive people look inside into our industry and be like, wow, that was smart.
Yeah, that is an ideal scene for sure. But one of the things that I think will excite dealers even more, not just the fear of GLB and fines, but the way you're thinking of this, a dealer group could be using the Azure cloud or the Amazon cloud. You're talking about loading up your tech software in their cloud providers' domain space. Allowing them to use your marketing automation, your website tagging, your PII collection, all within their cloud infrastructure, again, which allows them to be fully compliant. You're not kind of talking out of one side of your mouth and then keeping copies
Right.
in your own
Right.
data center. You're saying, look, I'm going to give you a tech stack that will track what people are doing on your website, help you do smarter marketing. That's what Orbee's been working on a long time. But
Absolutely.
now let's take it one step further. I'm going to start working with your website partners, with your digital retailing partners, to flip the script on who captures the PII. And dealer group, you send the signal to DR, you send the signal to chat, you send the signal to the website that something is unlocked, or some functionality is shown. That's
Yes.
a big change.
It is a big change. And, Brian, first of all, I really appreciate how you translate it, and you nailed it. We are going everything we built, campaign analytics, customer journeys, tag management, omni-channel marketing, personalization, and regulatory compliance is all going to be installable inside of the stack. And we have a client, Holman Automotive, rebranded to Holman. And, if you go to any of their websites, you won't actually see Orbee's pixels. It's in their domain. And, in the past, you'd install SAP for longtime software people. You've heard of SAP, you've heard of PeopleSoft or JD Edwards. All these things used to be installed. QuickBooks used to be installed. So this is just a cloud version of that, and is being done in many industries. WordPress is installed, right? I mean, Dealer Inspire uses an installed version of WordPress. So number one, we're not reinventing anything. We're following the common themes of today's technology. And you're right, we're working on an AWS partnership, where we become an official partner, a Microsoft partner for Azure, and a GCP partner for those who want to use Google Cloud Platform. And again, we are letting our clients have the keys to it. And like you said, not speaking out of one side of, we don't even want that PII. And
Right.
every vendor, Brian, should love this. You're saying I could still work with vendors. We're not saying, hey, dealership, cancel all of your vendors and do everything yourself. No, we're saying just protect this. So imagine vendors can still be working with their dealers without any of the liability liability around PII. Just imagine that you could actually reduce your insurance coverages and enable, and maybe you save the dealer some money on that, so the dealer could invest on their side, but everyone wins. And this is, again, this is absolutely why over the last 5 years we've been building this, and we finally have something so fantastic. Our amazing tech team and ops team have made our software portable. There's a lot of tech talk, Kubernetes, containers, all this techie stuff that I could talk about, but it's literally installable inside. So I would love to explore this. We're talking to a lot of groups, Brian. I really appreciate you calling me in for the CXO, because this is the fun. This is about to get fun, right? Because we always talk about the problems. I think by solving this one mega issue that's being sort of put in our ears by the FTC, I think innovation is going to flourish, and it's going to be such an amazing opportunity to change the car buying experience, where everything we've been worrying about, which is like which tool you're using or what UI or what domain you're on, it's just going to be a brand new kind of flow for the consumer. And these websites that do have 10 different vendors integrated, like you said, credit forms, chat forms, trade-in forms, will all act as one, and while still keeping the customer's data private and giving the customer choice to even remove their information, saying, hey, I want out, please opt me out. Right. Imagine that's all in one place. I am so excited for this industry.
I've had so many thoughts since you and I talked about this, and I'll just share one thing. One of the thoughts I came to was Team Velocity, who has built a very amazing website platform. And part of their marketing presentation was, hey, we built all the tools. They have their DR tool and their chat tool. Everything is native. And so once a consumer fills out a form once, they never have to fill it out again. And I was like, man, that's so cool. And I was thinking about this, and then I said, well, they still have an issue, because when a Team Velocity website is used for a Stellantis dealer, they want to put eShop on. And if the dealer's group says, no, we use CarNow Chat, that's the one we like, everyone's trained on it, right? Regardless of how good that initial integration was, the dealer still often chooses, a third party, or sets a third party, and sometimes the OEMs require third party, right? So if we don't fundamentally change the way we look at software, there's always going to be the next widget, the next thing that dealers want to put on their websites, which again then exposes them to GLB. So here's my challenge to the industry and all those who are listening, because obviously members of the tech community listen to these podcasts along with OEMs. It would be amazing to see a few website companies raise their hand and work with a tool, a few chat companies raise their hand, work with a tool. DR companies raise their hand, work with the tool to demonstrate the ability to break out that PII collection from your tool and move it to the dealer's collection platform, and to be able to accept that signal. Because on most, let's just use Podium as an example, it's a messaging platform. They ask for the name and then they ask for the phone number. I mean, it is a messaging platform. What would be so cool is if there was a messaging option on a website, hey, message us. It opens up the dealer's PII and then
it says, hi, Brian, how could I help you? I remember
right.
you from yesterday.
That's right. Or if it's the first time, they collect the information and then sends out the message through the Podium API, because they like Podium's, group messaging features or something. Who knows? But the idea is that we need to start working on a prototype that would work the best. And I think, Atul, and you may disagree, but I think the best way to start this is to get a few dealer groups engaged. And I know you're already working with a number of them, but I think the larger dealer groups, which have the most to lose financially, but also they have the resources and mindset that they are an IT organization. It would be very interesting to see the dealer groups working with you and having them tell, Dealer Inspire or Dealer eProcess, hey guys, when you install your websites on our stores, you have to set a flag to use our controlled data warehouse PII collection mechanism. As soon as that is shown to work, then I think that has to quickly be escalated to the OEM, so they understand that even though they're addicted to leads and there's so many people touching leads, they're really exposing their dealer network to huge liabilities.
I think you're right. Yeah, the OEM dilemma is the biggest third-party elephant in the room. And even within groups, right? Can one dealer in the dealer group speak to the other? And there's actually more ways to solve that, but I do believe you're right. I want to add that dealer groups especially need to begin to flex their muscle. And this isn't just at the OEM or whatnot. This is really on behalf of the user experience. You're a dealership group for a reason. It's not just a hodgepodge of dealer locations that you've put together to file your 8Ks and your 10Qs. It's really to create a better car buying experience. So flex those muscles, because I was just on the phone the other day with a sort of a reputation platform, after the car is sold, and they're getting all this PII of who bought the car. And we said, hey, the dealer needs all this data, and they were kind of skeptical about it. And I was like, usually, Brian, we have to CC the dealer and then they flex their muscles a bit and then the conversation changes. But I believe that dealer groups have the wherewithal to go out there and protect their revenue. Asbury did nearly 4 billion in a quarter. AutoNation did what, 7 billion in revenue, and Group One, I'm just looking at 3.84 billion. Use that muscle to think about your customer experience, think about your data privacy and protections, think about FTC breathing down your neck, because if the FTC is going to start anywhere, they're going to say, hey, does anyone know where we should start? And they're like, I think I saw a top 150 report from a company called Auto News. All right, how do we get a hold of that? We have to subscribe. How much is it? It's $30 a quarter. Great. Subscribe to it. Get me that list. Start calling. Start looking. And remember, General Motors, I want everyone to Google this. Google General Motors class action lawsuit Decibel. That's DECIBAL. This was a pixel listening to events, Brian, analytics at its base core, mouse movement, scrolling, clicking, page views, VDP views. GM had a class action lawsuit because there are trolls out there. Remember, FTC is one part of it. There are other people whose jobs is to go after, these are the patent trolls and the litigation trolls who are saying, I was on this website for this large group. They have a lot of money. Let's go ahead and sue them. Let's create a class action lawsuit. Let's find everyone who bought a car from them in that region or where they operate. And let's say, did you use AutoNation or whoever to actually get a car? Well, your PII might have been released to third parties. Give us a call. Let's do a class action. These are the kinds of fundamental problems that do actually happen. And
this is what we're trying to communicate. It's like, look, we're not alarmists. We're just practical people looking at this situation. And I will tell you that as dealer groups push down this road, the biggest, and you mentioned the biggest problem is that the OEMs measure performance on websites or DR tools based on leads. And of course, they can get leads with a lead ID, which is beautiful, and they can still count and see. But what they're not going to be able to do is do their own, cross-sell matchback reports and other things, because obviously it would require the consumer data to be released. And again, this is where the consumer versus customer definition comes in. When a consumer comes in and buys a car, they become a customer, and then sharing that data with the OEM and other things becomes more reasonable. But a consumer coming to a dealer's website and using a digital retailing tool and unlocking with their PII to even just see a price, or that their soft credit is being pulled without their direct knowledge to understand what their payoff is, that information, the OEM has no legal right to under GLB. And in fact, no one else does except the dealer, because that's whose website they went on. And all I'm saying is that for dealer groups, Atul will be presenting, and we're going to have an active conversation at the Automotive CXO Summit. It's just for C-suite leaders with 10 stores or more. I think we have 2 seats left on the on our May meeting in the Napa Valley. So if you're a CEO or a CMO or a CTO or a CIO of a dealer group, I invite you to come out for that one-day meeting. It's going to be amazing. And then stay for DMSC if you'd like. But this is a big topic. And the cool thing is that it fits in to Orbee's long-term strategy of being a provider of technology that would allow dealers to operate more efficiently with more transparency, to control first-party data and to leverage first-party data. So Atul, if a dealer wanted to learn more about what Orbee's doing on this topic, the GLB, but also about your cloud-enabled tagging, marketing management and deployment, what's the best way for them to set up a demo?
Right. So we just worked on a new website, long overdue. If you go to orbee.com, that's ORBEE.com, click the Get Started button, schedule a demo there, or you could actually register an account now, get your scripts live. I want to make it clear. This deadline for this new regulation is in December. The FTC is going to look positively at a trajectory of improvement, right? They're not saying snap your fingers, everything is solved. I mean, we got privacy issues everywhere in this world. So the key thing is have a clear roadmap to that solution. And Orbee has many of the components that will solve that future. So definitely go to Orbee.com, get started, get on a call with us. We have a great team of individuals, and we're still small enough where I love having that conversation because every dealer group we've learned is very different. Their problems are different. The permutations of all the different vendors they're using is like, there's a new combination, Brian. Like we haven't found one company or two companies that want their burrito the same way. You know what I mean? And it's so, but we appreciate that and we recognize that. And that's why we take a very solutions driven approach. So definitely do that and let's start a dialogue. And I'm really excited that I was invited by Brian to the CXO. I've been always walking the halls at the events, thinking what happens behind those doors besides the amazing wine tasting you have.
It's the power meeting before DMSC this year. And our next CXO summit will be in November before the Modern Retailing Conference. So for the dealers, OEMs and technology companies, I hope you do yourself a favor and go to my newsletter, look at the April 19th article that was posted on LinkedIn. It has some great resources and some thoughts. And then if you want to talk with Atul more in depth about how his platform could be a solution to a number of dealership challenges and obviously dealer group solutions, make sure to go to orbee.com. And let's talk about DMSC. It's coming up in just a few days, May 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. There's a few dealer tickets left. So go to digitalmarketingstrategies.org and get your tickets. Don't miss this amazing event. And again, if you are a C-suite executive from a dealer group of 10 or more stores, I have 2 seats left for the CXO Summit on the day before. That is Saturday, May 21st. And you would just need to reach out to me directly. And well, you can reach out through any platform that you'd like. And if this is the first time you've been participating in listening to one of my podcasts, you should know that I interview leaders, disruptors, and people who are working to create a modern retail experience. There are dozens of podcast interviews that are all relevant. So don't forget to go back and listen to some other podcast recordings. It's a great way to spend time when you're traveling in the car. So I want to thank Atul and everyone for listening today, and we'll see you next time on another podcast session.